So good morning, everybody. Let's do a formal welcome and hello. My name's Helen Scanlon. I'm part of the provider development team here at NCFE. We support targeted qualifications that NCFE offer in terms of teaching and learning, curriculum design, and making specifications and qualifications come to life. Joined this morning by lovely colleagues from WorldSkills UK who are going to be leading the session today. I will hand over to Jenna to say hello, and then we'll do our introductions.
Thanks, Helen. Hi, everyone. My name's Jenna Rathall. I am a high performance skills coach for WorldSkills UK, and I've been involved for 26 years now since I competed in Team UK. It's really nice to have you all on the call. Over to Laura.
Hello, it's great to see so many of you here today. I'm Laura Leong. I'm also a high performance skills coach working for the WorldSkills UK Centre of Excellence, which is in partnership with NCFE. And we're really proud to be working today along with the amazing Helen Scanlon.
Brilliant, thanks, Laura. So yes, we're going to have a very interesting session today built on the Centre for Excellence that WorldSkills UK and NCFE work together on. But without further ado, I'm going to hand back to Jenna and Laura for the session.
Thanks, Helen. So in today's session, we'll explore marginal gains theory and look at how this can be applied to a learner's journey. We'll be examining the conscious competence model and its impact on teaching and learning. And we'll also consider ambiguous criteria with a view to bringing greater transparency for our learners. Next slide, please. So if we can fully show that one. Right, what I want you to do is to think about these questions. So what are your learners' attitudes to competence and excellence? So initially, if we could just show the whole slide, Helen. So I want you to think about how true these statements are for a learner group. So think of the whole learner group and answer in terms of the whole. So score of 0 would be none of them would agree, and 10 would be all of them would agree. So somewhere along that scale, I want you to look at those 4 statements. So students believe it's worth aiming beyond a pass, have a sense of how their skills relate to those needed in their first job, believe the talent is what's needed for success, or 4, believe that their goals can be achieved. So we want you to give a rating score of either between 0 to 10 for how true each of those statements are. And Jenna is going to monitor the responses coming in and give us an overall picture of which score is highest and lowest while Jenna looks at the results. So if you could type your answers into the chat, and Jenna will come back to us after this next slide.
So we've got mainly 7s and 8s, and I'm guessing that's for question 1. So yeah, mainly 7s, Laura. So that's students believe it would be worth aiming beyond a pass.
6s and 7s, 7s and 8s, yes. Yeah, and so we really want to take that information kind of on board and think about how we can get more learners, if not all learners, to think that a journey of excellence is for them, and that this isn't just something for those who are considered to be particularly gifted or talented, and believe that their goals could be achieved if they were to look at them a little bit differently. And we're going to go into that in the next slide. If you could change over now for me, please, Helen. Thank you. So I'm going to ask you, some of you could be brave enough to come off mute and shout out if you wanted to. Others of you could put in the chat if you want to. What's actually happening when we look at this picture? What do you say? Do we have anything in the chat, Jenna?
Not yet.
No. Okay. So
Oh, just coming through. Thank you, Liz. Most people slog in one person loving life. The winner knows he has won by a good distance. And then we've got an outstanding athlete. You said this is a good one. Thank you, Helen. Usain Bolt celebrating before he's reached the finish line.
Absolutely. That they're all true, but that one is particularly true. So Usain has turned his body and twisted towards the audience. He's almost in that kind of showboating. He's seen the gap between him and the nearest guy behind him. It's huge, and he knows that he's got the win in the bag. So that is really what we want to talk about. What was his particular focus or his goal? Yes, you'd be right. He is actually focused only to the win. So he was only focused to the outcome goal, the outcome goal being the win. So he actually stopped trying once he knew the win was in the bag. And so that in itself means that if we focus only to the outcome, all of those rest of the people in the field would be demotivated. So all we need as educators to think about how those people at the start, like who are in second and third place and fourth place, what is motivating them to continue and to continue to put in their very best performance, because they will need to see that gap but still continue putting in the very best version of their performance that they can. And the reason that they're doing that is because they're working on process goals or goals that are to do with their performance and their personal best. And that is how we can utilize this and use this as the philosophy that drives us forwards, because we need all of our learners to think about how they celebrate the everyday achievements and the small changes to their performance, not just focus on the big win that only one person would potentially get. We don't want them to not want that big goal, but we do really move the focus to those individual changes in the daily sense. So if we go to the next slide, please. So actually, WorldSkills UK's perspective is that excellence starts with a mindset change and an openness to continuous improvement journey, and that we thrive when we focus on our personal best and performance and process goals rather than just focusing on the outcome alone. So the journey is lifelong rather than being seen as just one end destination. And everyone can take this approach, every learner at every level. Natural aptitude plays only a small part in the progress to mastery. So that's why we asked that question about talent and perceptions of talent being important, because talent plays only a part in this equation. It's determination, focus, attention to process and daily change that make the biggest change. And we see that with the competitors that we bring through in squads and teams. Ultimately, we need those who pass our qualifications and courses to be judged competent and be able to progress and meet the needs of industry. And that's why we focus on this need for a move beyond competence in our particular focus. So next slide, please. So I'm going to ask you if you know what a marginal gain is first off, because it may be that you all already have some knowledge. So if you do, if you could put that into the chat. I'll just give you a little bit of background whilst I give Helen a chance to think about queuing up the video. So no knowledge, that's absolutely fine. So marginal gains come from a guy named Dave Brailsford, who was given the job of actually changing the fortunes of the British cycling team. So the British cycling team had got an appalling record, really. They'd only won one medal in about 100 years. And it was even at a point where the sponsors of the bikes didn't actually want to lend or give their bike brand over to the UK team because they didn't want the negative association. And absolutely, that's right, Liz. And so the story is Dave Brailsford was given the job of changing the fortunes, and he came up with a system of changing things in a marginal, incremental way that enabled that story to happen. And I'm going to let Helen play you the video now so you can hear it from him.
Is about Team Sky, which is Great Britain's professional cycling team. Sometime in the mid-2000s, around 2010, they hired a man named Dave Brailsford. And at the time, Team Sky had a very middle-of-the-road record when it came to performance on the world stage. They had won about 1 gold medal in the last 100 years, from 1908 to 2008. They had never won a Tour de France, the premier event in cycling. And when they hired Dave Brailsford, they said, we would like to change this. We'd like to improve our performance. We'd like to reach a higher level of performance. What's your plan to help us do that? And when they hired Brailsford, he said, I have this strategy called the aggregation of marginal gains. And the way that he described it was the 1% improvement in nearly everything that you do. And so they started by looking at a lot of things you would expect a cycling team to look at. They improved their bike tires, made them slightly lighter. They put a more ergonomic seat on the bike. They had their riders wear biofeedback sensors so they could see how each person responded to the training and practice that they did each day. They had their outdoor riders wear indoor racing suits because they were lighter and more aerodynamic. But then they did a variety of things that you wouldn't expect a cycling team to do. They split tested different types of massage gels to see which one led to the best form of recovery. They taught their riders how to wash their hands to reduce the risk of infection and keep them healthy. They even figured out what kind of pillow led to the best night's sleep for each rider and then brought that on the road with them to hotels. So Brailsford said, if we can actually execute on this strategy, if we can aggregate all these small changes, these little 1% improvements, then I think we can win the Tour de France in about 5 years. He ended up being wrong. They won the Tour de France in 3 years, and then they repeated again the 4th year with a different rider. And then just last year, they won for the 3rd time in 4 years. And Brailsford's strategy really came to fruition at the Olympics in London in 2012, when they won 70% of the gold medals available. And so what I'd like to start us off with is the idea that small improvements actually can add up to a very significant change in a relatively short period of time. And this is just basic math, all right? If you get 1% better each day over 365 days, you end up 37 times better at the end of the year. If you get 1% worse, you take yourself almost all the way down to 0. Now, you might say, okay, well, 1% improvements are nice, but clearly no one is going to get 1% better every single day. So is that ever enough to accumulate to anything, considering that we're not going to be perfect all the time? And I would argue, yes. In fact, you can get 10 times better if you get 1% better 5 days a week, 46 weeks a year, so it's about 230 days in total. That gives you 6 weeks off for holidays, illness, laziness, and just generally not getting things done. But you're still 10 times better at the end of the year. And what I would like to propose is that the way to do this is not by setting better goals for ourselves or at our organizations, but by building better systems and obtaining better habits. In fact, you could say that the goal had never changed. They wanted to win a Tour de France each year. They wanted to win Olympic gold medals. It wasn't the goal that made the difference. Instead, it was their system, the way that they applied those improvements in a 1% basis day after day.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Helen. So that last comment is super pertinent because it's about the system that we employ to get there.
Are you
It's
ready
about
to transform your
the
trading
changes.
and achieve your financial goals? Well, at TrendSignal, we've been teaching
Sorry,
people
just bear with
how
me
to
a
trade
second.
from
That's all
home
right. It's
since
no problem at
2003,
all.
making us one of the
No problem at all. So we know that we need to granulate and look at every aspect of performance. This doesn't have to be in a sporting context. This can be in any life context. It could be in any pursuit that we want to achieve, and especially in the educational domain. So if I want you to kind of bear with me now, because we're going to look at different facets of the way that what the considerations we need to take around the ability we have to granulate and to examine the things that we teach. So next slide, please. Right, please, in the chat now, I want you to bear with me and do this for me. So I want you to write down the steps involved in tying shoelaces into a bow. And I don't want you to physically tie a bow so that you can do it and analyze what you're doing. I want you to do it from memory.
While people are doing that as well, I just want to encourage people to put any questions that they have for Laura or Jen in the chat as well. So just while you're writing those steps, and also think of any questions you might have. And while we've got this pause as well, we've just had a request from an AI bot to be transcribing the session. I just want to check that everybody's okay with having the session transcribed by an AI bot. If you have any objections, just please pop it into the chat for us. And it's up to the people who are in this session to agree that that's okay.
How are we getting on, Jenna?
So thank you, Samantha. Take both ends and cross over, make a loop at each end, cross again and tie a knot. And then thank you,
Fantastic.
Helen. Right lace over left lace, and right lace goes under the left, pull tight. Take the right lace and make into a loop and cross the left lace over. So yeah, quite detailed. It's difficult to kind of unpick something that you're so competent at.
Absolutely it is. And if we could go to the next slide. The reason why I asked you to do this was to illustrate a point, and the point is about the state of consciousness that we are in at any point in the learning journey. So this is the conscious competence model. So when we learn something, initially when we approach that domain or that skill area, we don't know about it. So we're unconsciously incompetent because we don't know what we don't know, and we're kind of blissfully ignorant. And then there comes a point where we become consciously aware of the fact that we don't know, and we see the amount that there is to learn. That's the point where we're consciously incompetent. We know we don't know, and that's uncomfortable. So we get onto the business of learning with the support of a tutor who then helps us to become proficient and consciously competent. And that is the point at which you will be able to, when you first learn to tie your shoes with concentration, tie the shoes, but you have to really think about the process. But beyond that, when we've been doing the thing a lot, like you clearly have all your life been tying your shoelaces, you move to a point where you can do it without conscious thought or even being aware that you're doing it, because it's moved to a part of your mind that is unconscious, and it's really something which you're because the skill level is there to mastery, it's become part of your skill set, and therefore there's a challenge there. So we see, as educators, what do you think the challenge is in regard to that? Because we've got to a point of unconscious competence where we can do the task, whether that be whatever practical task that would be, we can demonstrate it, but we've become unconscious. So what's the issue there?
So thank you, Stella, that we can become complacent. Thank you, Fiona. We can stop striving to improve.
Yeah, both of those are very true. It's also true to say that we are so much in the unconscious about what we do that we forget that other people don't know what to do. Absolutely. Recognizing the unconscious knowledge that needs to be brought back to consciousness. And we need to be able to analyze the detail of our performance in order to be able to effectively transmit that to the learners, because often they will say something to you along the lines of, you make that look really easy, and that's quite a complimentary way of them trying to get it across to you that they don't actually know how you're achieving the thing so efficiently, so quickly, so cleanly, that so they kind of need more information to be able to kind of bridge across to where you're getting to. So if we go to the next slide then, please. So the next step would be to take this activity beyond this session. You could take this activity that you regularly teach, for instance, choose something which is a task that you would teach or have learners do that's about an hour long. And you could break it down into as many subtasks as possible. And this is a really valuable exercise that our training managers do, as it effectively helps us look at the areas we can search out marginal gains. So if we go to the next one, I can give you an example. So you could do it in a list format, like this software development example, where they've granularized the various steps in the process. But even better, on the next slide, we've got an image, which is like a flow image of a particular task that's taken place in auto body repair. The next one, we've got a beauty therapy, a manicure example, and each one of these boxes has got particular important considerations within them. Next one, please. So I'm going to talk to you about a task which is on the left is a corsage. It's a wired design that's worn at a wedding potentially, and it's a difficult thing to make because it relies on very many different types of techniques. It's actually usually taught by demonstration, and then the learners do it, and the results are generally not great. And the impact of that is that they continue to underperform in the technical sense for quite a long time, and they need to progress the same techniques to make the thing on the right, which is a wedding bouquet in wired construction. So you could never really become proficient at the thing on the right until you've got the thing on the left done properly and to a high standard. So if we go to the next slide, I can kind of tell you that the reason why that task is so difficult is because there's so many considerations that it's almost like cognitive overwhelm. You need to be able to choose the right materials for the job that would last. You need all the design considerations. You need the wiring considerations, the wiring weights, the application of tape to wires, the unitization of the thing, and then the actual assembly of the thing. So within every single task that we as educators show and demonstrate, there are sub considerations that we need to talk about. And these are what we call the core competencies. So isolating each of these core subtasks is super important strategy that I would recommend you take forward. If we go to the next slide, please. The example of the wired corsage is broken down here for you to see, and you can see that there are so many kind of interdependencies. And in breaking the task down, I realised I would need to focus directly into each box and supply more support and more detail for each subtask skill. There was also going to be a need to resequence the teaching of the task and dedicate more time to the basics. So for instance, the taping of the wires would need sufficient time to get that up to a level before we launch into the whole task. So I've put the stars onto the diagram to indicate that those are the areas that I would know that my learners would consistently year on year struggle with. And so to remind me that I need to think about the sequence, think also about providing more information, more transparency in those particular areas they struggle. Another thing you can do is you can actively give this activity of granulating the whole task down, like it is on the screen, to the learner themselves and ask them to put the stickers on or the stars on and identify where the issues for them are. And then that becomes a nice tutorial discussion where you can get into a real close understanding of where are they experiencing their difficulties from their perspective. It helps, and this is what our training managers did only a couple of weeks ago at one of the boot camps. In the next slide, so each of these,
Laura?
yeah, sure.
Can I just add a great comment from James, which adds to what you're saying. He said, for educators, it's difficult to remember why the task used to be difficult in the first place, and therefore then difficult to teach it to somebody else.
Absolutely correct. It is, isn't it? Because we've kind of transcended that point. We see kind of to understand their perspective is really a challenge. And so this kind of exercise tries to bridge that gap and tries to get us on the road to seeing their perspective, because it's almost like we stand either side of a ravine and we need to see each other's what's happening from either end. I completely agree with that. That's a great comment. Thank you, Jenna.
And Fiona has said, will the slides be available after? Yes, NCFE will be sending them out. I think, Helen?
For sure.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks.
So within each of those boxes that were on the screen, there will be particular considerations of detail that we need to get across. So if we then further break each box down and analyze ourselves, what is it that excellence looks like within each of those boxes? So in this kind of example, it's very explicit. So if I was to take application of tape to wires and then look at this, they need to know that the ends need to be sealed in. They need to know that there's no breaks in the tape. The coating's even and semi-transparent. No opacity or colour change. No wrinkles. And the tape has been stretched during application. And this is almost the information that is carried like gold dust in your head as an educator. It's not explicitly said anywhere in the qualification, but you know that that's what the industry needs for that real expression of excellence. There's another example which is on the next slide, which is a digital example, so that you can see this not in just the practical traditional crafts. This is applicable to every single educator who teaches absolutely any area. It could be that we just need to be sure that we're supplying enough detail in each one of those boxes to move the learner forward. So I would encourage you to take that task forward in your teams and to really use that as a way of applying that marginal gain strategy beyond the session. The next slide, please. So just to finish this particular area on how we raise standards, it's possible to think in terms of how we can potentially take this activity and you can also seek out ways of raising standards for opportunities to change things like task timings. So it might be that you do the same task, but you reduce the timing with no loss of quality. You could, if it's a skill which has measurement involved in it, you could change the tolerances or the gap between what's acceptable. And that is a quick way of working to a higher level. We can also think about changing expectations or complexities relating to task. And this could be brought to light by putting in trickier to handle information or more difficult materials or curved balls or unknown or unseen clients. Or it could be that you ask them to select their tools and equipment, that kind of opportunity to just flex the standard upwards. So I want you to take that and reflect on that beyond the session. And I'm going to now pass over to Jenna, who's going to talk a little bit more about the next segment, about how we look at ambiguous criteria.
Thanks, Laura. So when you are designing your own activity, again, what we're building on is for looking really at raising the standards and pushing those learners towards excellence. We look at, exactly like Laura said, a change of tolerance, expectation, timing, and complexity. So that's what our training managers will focus on, and that's what we can bring into the classroom. So what we're going to do is, if you can write into the chat examples of what you either do now or what you could do to create these changes. So what we're doing is setting the scene for competition-based activity and really pushing towards excellence. So is there anything that you're currently doing or that you could do in future to change and tweak the tolerance, expectation, timing, or complexity to really push for excellence and put those learners outside their comfort zone, but in a very safe space?
Jenna, Helen here. I'm just going to pop in and ask. It feels like we've been talking about skills-based assessments and tasks so far. Can the same be done for knowledge-based?
Oh, yes, definitely. So what we're going to move on to is the fact that competition-based activity can suit all subjects, even English, maths, theoretical subjects. again, because it's perhaps changing the expectation or changing the complexity, we could look at that. And then in a minute, we're going to go into the fact that how we look at all the kind of wraparound aspects that we can really push with theoretical subjects. So definitely, yeah, competition-based activity. Perhaps there's a misconception that it's just for skill-based activity, but that's not the case at all. We really encourage and grow competition-based activity for those subjects. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you.
So thank you, Rachel. We've got changing the expectation to suit the needs of the learners is fantastic and can create more inclusion with the classroom, within the classroom. That's great. Anybody got any specific ideas that they've used? Anybody created any activity that changes the complexity or, really just really pushes those learners towards excellence?
We've got a few, Jenna. When we do observations on learners, we could do all observations in the morning. Then when they are in their best, when the children they care for are less tired in the early years scenario.
Brilliant,
Incorporating different types of assessment to stretch and challenge this year. I've added the creation of websites. Yeah, stretch and challenge activities.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Okay, next slide, please, Helen. So again, perhaps we think that excellence is somebody that is performing at a high level all the time, or heavily based on talent, natural talent in a particular skill or subject area. But actually, that's not the case at all. We see excellence in lots of different pockets across how we deliver, even educators, and that can be the environment. So even online, you can see differentiation between excellence activities that we do, certain behaviours, performance, process. It doesn't always have to be the product and the outcome, which Laura was alluding to earlier with the Usain Bolt photograph. It can really be about finding that pocket of excellence and really growing that. And it doesn't always have to be a replication of the assessment criteria. So we've got some more comments in the chat here. So thank you, Emily. Reflection on what they have done and what they can do moving forward. Great. If the key word is to outline for level 1, I would push them to provide more information to encourage them to provide the source. Brilliant. Okay, that's fantastic. Some great ideas there. So when you come away from this session, please reflect on the fact that where do you see excellence? And that's where we can really hone in on and really develop within your own skill or subject areas. Next slide, Helen, please. So when we're designing competition-based activity, we don't tend to replicate the assessment criteria. So if we have a competition in maths, for example, it wouldn't just be an exam paper and whoever got the highest mark would be the winner. That's not what we're trying to do. Trying to look at everything from a different angle. So for example, it could be that a learner is studying for maths, let's say. But actually, it could be that when they go into industry, it could be that they are working in insurance and they would be required to have those team player skills, those team building skills, as well as communication skills. So we can design a competition around employability, or those technical skills that are particularly weak at, that we really need to grow because it's a skill that needs to be mastered. It could be frustrations as educators in learners' behavioural performance. So, for example, I had an educator I worked with who was incredibly frustrated that her learners would switch on the computer or laptop, and because it takes time to load and everything, a process that they're following, they would then go on their phones. So she designed a competition around the fact that those short 5 minutes of how they can use their time. I also had an educator that taught bricklaying. and they designed an activity around attention to detail and focus, really assessing how many times they lost focus, went on their phones, and where they were able to really focus on particular areas and bring out that attention to detail in their work. And industry ready. Okay, there may be some subjects that don't directly feed into a particular role, but it could be that anybody learning and studying for a qualification in English, that there are certain roles that they might go into. So what is lacking of their skills that we really need for industry? What attributes do your learners not currently have in relation to industry? And you're the experts at that. So thank you, Liz. We've got, do you think mock interviews would work for this? Yes, definitely. We have lots of educators that when we design a competition-based activity with, they will focus on interviews. And it wouldn't just be about perhaps the presentation. We really hone in on that eye contact, the body language, the approachability, the questioning techniques. We really go into detail above and beyond the specification, above and beyond what their expectation is, above and beyond to supplement the assessment criteria based on all of the gold dust and the experience that you have as educators to ensure that they're being placed in the best possible position for the next step in life. So competition-based activity, when we work with our educators, we look at 3 different types of activity that we can create. So the first one is criteria that supplements the assessment. So it's designing a mini competition that potentially supplements the assessment criteria. So if there's a particular area, so for example, in sport and fitness, one of the criteria, it says the learner confidently delivered the technique. So what we would look at is, okay, what does confidently mean? Let's break that down. Could it mean that we can put in criteria about eye contact, body language, again, questioning technique, being approachable, warm, smiley, etc. Then another option is to look at criteria that is in addition to the assessment that adds pressure. So because in the classroom we're in a very, very safe space, that's where we can push them into out of their comfort zone, into stretch and challenge, like you were everybody on the call was talking about before. And this is where we add a little bit of pressure. So for example, if it was a hairdresser and they had a specific time given for a service, or in early years, a specific time given for an activity, how do we change that pressure? How do we add in something that potentially may crop up, let's say, in industry? And then finally, a milestone event. Now, this is perhaps what we traditionally think about what a competition is, where we schedule it into the curriculum, and this is usually a full task and plots progress. So we have a few organisations that use competition activity at the start, the middle and the end before preparing for any kind of final assessments. And then because it's the same criteria and it's really detailed criteria, we're able to plot process. Brilliant, thank you. So these are just some ideas of what we've developed with other educators. So if we go back to creating a criteria for excellence, we could look at communication skills and how to talk to the customer. So, for example, a qualification in automotive is absolutely fantastic. It does what it says on the tin. What an educator said that I was working with said that, you know what, I'd really like to develop a competition based around just purely communication to really grow the learner's ability to talk to customers, because that's what they're particularly weak at. A great pressure test example that I've seen is coping with pressure. So again, the qualification asks for, in cooking, for a hollandaise sauce to be made, but the pressure could be added when a learner is presented with a hollandaise sauce that is split. So it's trying to think of those ways that how can we add that pressure of something that might happen in industry and when they go out from college or our training provider. So the competition around the holiday source already being split and handed to them was based around, did the learner cope with pressure? Did they keep calm? Did they follow a set process? And did they rectify it? And then finally, a milestone, looking at all the unknowns and curveballs of what industry can throw at you, change of client brief, etc., if it was a design qualification. Thanks, Helen. Next slide, please. So this is how we would do it. We would look at the qualification requirements and look at how we can put all of our experience and gold dust as an educator into that criteria for a competition. So the qualification might say for nail painting, apply sufficient base coat, polish coat and top coat for the desired finish. So it's about unpicking that unconscious competence and looking at how we can really get detailed criteria and break that down. So what does that mean for an educator? What does that mean for a learner? What does sufficient base mean? What does desired finish mean? So we start to really unpick and really give very detailed criteria, potentially looking at measurements as well, to ensure the learner has really been able to go to a whole other level with excellence, and they're fully aware of everything that they would need to work on, because we're unpicking that unconscious competence. Next slide, please, Alan. Thank you. So this is a painting rubric from Art and Design, because as I said before, competition-based activity pressure tests can be used in all subject and skill areas. So if you're able to read it, it does detail the different levels. It differentiates between excellence. And what I'm going to ask you to do is focus on any ambiguous words. Now, as educators, we are fully aware of what these words mean. If you were in art and design, you were able to unpick and know exactly what that kind of stands for when it comes to things like art exhibits a lack of planning in the design and composition. Ideas are expressed with no unity. So as educators, we know exactly what that is. But for a learner, that sometimes is difficult. So we can help them by manufacturing excellence. We can unpick what no unity means to ensure that they can use this as a self-reflective tool and really build on this and really push for excellence. So what I'd like to do, if you're able to see it, is just have a look, and we're going to release a poll. I'd like to ask, do you think there's between 0 and 5 ambiguous words in that rubric? 6 to 10, 11 to 15, or 16 plus ambiguous words that we can really use this to our advantage and unpick for a learner in a competition-based activity. So thank you,
the poll
Helen.
should be launched in the chat now. Can you see the poll in the chat is my question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll leave it open for another minute or so, just to allow people to scan the text and vote for their choice.
So potentially your subject uses rubrics, which is fantastic. So now it's looking at how we can take this information and use it for to our best advantage with learners and in a competition-based activity.
I'll just leave it open just a little bit longer, just to allow everyone to give their vote.
Got things, for example, in colour, it says colour choices do not represent the idea and application and is poorly done. So that will what we would class as an ambiguous word because of the use of poorly done. how do we unpick that as an educator so that a learner can understand that and we can manufacture excellence? Brilliant. So we've got the results in the chat. So the majority have said 46%. So thank you for answering. The answer is actually 16 plus. I know it's really difficult to read, but that's a great opportunity then when we're using rubrics, when we're using the assessment criteria, we can really unpick all of our unconscious competence, all of the absolute excellence that you have, that you are continually teaching every day, and use that precious gold dust in a competition-based activity. Okay. So yeah, it was actually 16 plus, so we can really tap into that. Thank you, Helen. So we've got another poll now, but just before I do it, I just want to go through this. So when we're writing criteria for a competition-based activity, where again, we're really pushing that change in complexity, change in expectation, change in timings, we really want to focus on high quality criteria. And that criteria is essential for a learner to be able to not only plot exactly where they are, but it gives the detail of how they can improve. So let's take hairdressing, for example. The consultation was completed well. So potentially an educator would know exactly what that means. They know exactly what they're looking for. They've been teaching for quite a long time. They know what a really good consultation looks like. They could also put criteria in the consultation was efficient, because again, the educator would know. The consultation was effective and carried out demonstrating strong communication skills. So I want you to ask, is there any ambiguous words in those statements above? And then D, the consultation was carried out using a high level of communication skills. And by high level, they mean maintaining eye contact throughout, ask more than 2 questions, and put the client at ease through positive body language by smiling and nodding. So what I'd like you to do is, Helen's going to release a poll. I'd like you to tell me out of A, B, C, and D, which is the strongest criteria with the minimum amount of ambiguous words. So ambiguous words, again, is anything that an educator would very easily understand and have a lot of experience with, but a word that may just need unpicking for a learner.
Going to leave it open just a few more seconds just to allow everybody to submit their vote.
Laura, once we finish the poll, would you be able to look through and see if anybody else has given some great ideas that we can share?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, Helen. So if we look at the results, yep, correct, 96%. The highest quality response and criteria would be D. So when we're writing criteria or even feedback, we can unpick our unconscious competence to give much detailed criteria. And if we are changing a time of tolerance, complexity, etc., really focus on the fact that the detail is the most important part. Okay, so thank you. And Rob, D is more specific against which the task is assessed. Thank you. So just before I focus on key points to consider, was there any other great ideas in the chat, Laura?
Yeah, we've got a few comments. So during progress reviews for apprentices, excellence can be seen during their time on the programme by their confidence and talking about what they've learned. I always champion personal and professional growth in my learners. And the question was asked, do you think mock interviews would work for this? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great idea and something which would be really helping them with their employability, and it would give you the opportunity to speak to the specifics like Jenna's just been saying about what it looks like to perform confidently in that kind of scenario. So you could come together and agree what the ideal looks like. We concentrate on ready and respect and what this looks like in real life scenarios, which I think is a tremendous idea. Relating to real experiences makes it more meaningful for the learner.
Yeah.
And let's just see if there's anything beyond the polls. Oh, yes, someone's made a comment. Perhaps you want to talk about the poll first, and then there's a comment on it.
Yeah, read that out before, so thank you.
Okay.
And yeah, that's brilliant. Fantastic. Yeah, so when we are working with educators on the Centre of Excellence, we often find that it's actually not the technical skills that is the difficulty, it's the employability, the communication skills. So a competition-based activity, that's when we can use that to really develop those particular areas. Okay. All right, so key points to consider. So when you are writing your own criteria, now that could be feedback, it could be a marking scheme if you are considering any kind of competition activity, is to first of all remove all ambiguous wording. Really focus on the resource being written in learner language so that they can understand it, and we're really kind of almost, stating the obvious and manufacturing excellence. A really good example that I tend to use is I was teaching my son to drive, to help the driving instructor, and he wanted to pass faster. And he was asking me questions that, so which gear do I go into, and at what point do I turn the wheel, and things like that. And I really had to pull over, get in the driver's seat myself, to be able to actually unpick all of those kind of 20 plus years of driving, to be able to tell him the answer, to really kind of give him the detail that this is the gear that you would go in, at this point you would start to turn, etc. So it's really difficult to unpick our unconscious competence, but if you can do that in your own particular subject areas or skill, that's when you get the real quality when it comes to competitions. Avoid repeating assessment criteria, so add more detail and ensure you use learner language. And as I just said, unpick your unconscious competence and break down every aspect of what excellence looks like, exactly like Laura was telling you with the breakdown of the task. Write the criteria in learner language so that the resource becomes a self-assessment tool and reduces lengthy feedback from the educator. All right. So Laura, anything that you'd like to add?
No, I think that's brilliant. You always have a singular phrase, which I think is really powerful, which is when you're looking at an assessment criteria, ask yourself, and what does that look like? So Jenna always asks educators that question, and what will it look like when that's the case? And if it's not immediately obvious how that will be observed, then it probably needs a bit more detail.
Brilliant, thank you. Anybody got any questions that they'd like to add?
Oh, we've got a comment. Thank you. I've really enjoyed this session. I'll certainly make me think moving forwards. That's great, Rachel.
Fantastic, and thank you, Helen. You've put the survey in the chat.
Brilliant, thank you. I think one of the things that I'd like to comment on is no matter what level the course qualification or programme is at, this works. And it really, in my experience, engages and motivates learners to, to try even harder and look at the detail themselves to build up their own picture of what good and what excellent, what high standards look like.
Liz has put a great comment in the fact that, excellence seems too much of a big leap, but actually small marginal gains, really focusing on the criteria, looking at what excellence looks like, and small incremental stages to get there.
Yeah.
It makes it, a lot more achievable.
Definitely. It's for everybody in the everyday.
Yeah.
So unless anybody has any questions, comments, we've reached the end of the session today. As I say, massive thank you to Jenna and Laura for sharing their knowledge and expertise. NCFE are very proud to work with WorldSkills UK. They have such a strong reputation for high standards, and as an award organisation, we often get asked, how can we raise student or learner outcomes? Well, this past 3/4 of an hour, absolutely tick that box. This is how you raise learner outcomes in assessments. So thank you so much.